Today on the Home Winemaking channel, I'm going to do a backyard vineyard update. I'm going to talk about my pruning plan, and I'll show you a little surprise find that I found yesterday when just walking through here. It's April 8th and we're in southwestern Pennsylvania, so everything's kind of starting to wake up around here. You're going to see some trees budding out. You're probably wondering why I haven't pruned already. Normally, in most areas, you're going to prune grapevines in like mid to late winter. But here, the biggest risk that I have, aside from winter damage, which we've had none of whatsoever, is going to be late spring frosts. So these vines naturally want to bud out, start to leaf out. And if we get a late frost, we're in really big trouble. So what I'm trying to do is delay that bud break. So bud break is when these vines start to, buds kind of start to create little baby leaves and try to create their little shoots and things. Well, right now, these vines have just, hundreds and hundreds of buds on them. So they have to spread out all that energy between each one of these buds. Whereas if I prune these back to 2 or 3 buds per cane, they're gonna wake up like right now and start budding out. But on April 8th in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, we are pretty likely to get another frost before the year's over. If I did prune now, which is also really late as it is, I still would probably delay bud break a little bit because these vines are gonna drip like crazy. As soon as I cut right now, we're gonna have sap flowing like crazy, and we could lose a little bit of carbohydrates, which could kind of slow bud break, which is mostly what I did last year. But this year I'm gonna take it a step further. I'm gonna wait till I get, I don't know, maybe 4-inch shoots on some of these vines. And what's cool about a grapevine is these canes they call it apical dominant. So almost all your grapevines are going to bud out from the top first and work their way back to the basal buds, which are the buds you're going to use for, at least in a vertical shoot position vine, they're the buds you're going to use to for your fruiting canes. So I'll let these ones up here that are going to get pruned off anyways, I'll let them try to leaf out. That'll delay everything down here. And then in a week or two, I'll prune everything back. So most of these I'm going to most of these I'm going to spur prune. So I'll kind of show you how I'm going to do that. And I'll show you some tools that I like to use to do my pruning. As we get to the tops of some of these canes on this Cabernet Franc right here, you'll see some of these buds are already at, I would call it bud swell, and probably by the end of today or tomorrow, they're really gonna fully burst, and I would call that bud burst. So they are just waking up like crazy. And that's mostly happening at the tips of these things, and not so much back at the base, but some of them are starting to wake up at the base. Here's a cane on that Cabernet Franc. All these I've got trained to 2 trunks, so that if I do have some really severe winter damage, I've kind of got a backup, and it's kind of like spare parts basically. So if you get 50% of your vineyard damaged, you still might be pretty okay. So what I'm gonna do with these, you can see all these little buds down here, and these are gonna start waking up really soon. I'm gonna use these Corona hand pruners. These things work really good. I'll put a link in the video description for these. And I'm just gonna prune these back to, like, here's 1 bud, 2 bud, 3 buds. I'll prune it to right there. You can see some weird stuff. Some of these canes kind of come from the bottom and work their way up. And the reason that happened is last year we did have some late freeze damage. So all these buds on the top, which last year I cane pruned this, so this was just bent over. buds on the top all died. They were the first to open up, so these buds away from the sun kind of saved the day for me. So here I have relatively fertile soil. I'm gonna leave quite a few canes. I'll probably leave a cane about every 3 inches. This trellis is actually set up so I can do vertical shoot positioning where I go up, or I can actually bend the canes down in addition and do smart Dyson. And what that allows me to do is leave a lot more vegetative growth without it shading its own self out, which is a problem. If you have too much shade, your grapes are really going to struggle to ripen properly. So while you're doing your pruning, something you're going to want to watch for is any dead wood. If you find anything dead, so when you cut into the cane, if it's brown in the inside, instead of normally you'll have a kind of a green ring just inside the bark. If it's brown, you're going to want to cut back until you reach the green wood. Sometimes there'll be almost like a key shape coming from the bark, and that would be an indication of not necessarily just winter damage, but actually disease. So there's something called Eutypa, I might be saying that wrong, but Eutypa dieback, and that's I think it's a bacterial disease that a grapevine can get, and you really, if you see that, you're gonna probably even wanna sanitize your pruners before moving on past that, because you really don't wanna spread that. That can ultimately kill the whole vine, and you'll hear people, the slang term for it's called dead arm, and it's actually relatively common as you get into these growing areas where it's not super dry. You see these little mounds of dirt around all the vines. That's called hilling up. So I did that before the winter. And the purpose for that is to protect, like if we had a really, really deep cold that just wiped everything out, everything under that hill should be alive. And things like crown gall, some of the things that happen right at the base of the trunk, I kind of hope to better prevent that by hilling up like this. Some of these vines are getting pretty big, so these would be starting in their 4th growing season. You can see my finger here to get a size of scale, where this one here will be in its 3rd growing season. I'll just mention some of the varieties that I've got growing here. So I've got Cabernet Franc, Merlot. Right over here is Blaufrankisch above Molly there. If you go down to the end, we've got Cabernet Sauvignon, which is, it requires a pretty long growing season. We were able to ripen that up to about 23% sugar last year, which actually isn't bad. Some of the things like Cabernet Franc and the hybrids, we were pushing all the way up to 25 or 26%. One row past the puppy over there is going to be Riesling. And then most of the end row is Traminette, which is, I really, really love that grape. One of the parent vines is Gewürztraminer, and it makes a really phenomenal white wine. It's really easy to grow. And then some of the ones towards the end, I've got a couple Noiret and also Marquette, which are hybrid red vines. And those hybrids, they actually have really fruitful secondary buds. So if I really wanted, I could prune those right now. And even if we had frost damage, we would probably really be fine, because it would basically create yet another cane that would also be fruitful. Usually secondary canes from secondary buds on vinifera, which are going to be your European grapes, are not going to be fruitful. So you'll have a live vine, it's just not going to really make any fruit for you. All right, now my surprise visitor that I found here is going to be this Praying Mantis Egg Sack. So I think what I'm going to do with that is save it, because I'm not, as I prune these, I'm probably going to burn most of these pruning. So I'll probably save this egg sack and stick it in a jar and disperse these little baby praying mantises throughout my garden to help keep the bugs back. You can see some more buds here on the Marquette that are just really waking up. I mean, these are like, by the end of today, I think these are gonna really start to burst, and honestly, by a few days from today, we're gonna see some little baby canes coming out of there. So there's kind of my preliminary update for the vineyard for this year. We're just kind of trying to continually train this into shape, and it's starting to get pretty good. I think this year we should get a borderline full harvest, which on this little vineyard, it's got about 65 vines, could be anywhere from like 300 to 500 pounds. If you like little videos like this, I often will post things like this on my Patreon page, patreon.com/makewine, and also be sure to swing by my website, smartwinemaking.com. Thanks for watching.